emailed me, which is quite a few of you at this point, should probably do that real quick if you have not. And those of you that have, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. Oh yeah, number 1 uses the discriminant. In case you didn't figure that out. Alright, so looking at number 1. Okay, not too bad. So 2x plus y equals 20. And y is equal to a plus, what was it? 18 over x minus 3. Okay, so if we are trying to find these points of intersection and where they intersect, values where they don't intersect, etc., we are looking at setting them equal to each other, substituting in whatever you want to do for your method. Personally, I would just substitute, so I don't have to manipulate the left-hand side or anything like that. I'm just going to straight up substitute that in. So 2x plus a plus 18 over x minus 3 equals 20. You can solve the top one for y, set them equal, do it however you want, but this is how I would do it just because I don't have to do any extra work. There's no extra steps for me to mess up anything, moving anything around, etc., etc. Any suggestions on my next step after that?
Multiply everything by x minus 3.
Why on earth would I ever do that, Deborah?
So that you don't have a thing in the denominator.
That's a really complicated way of saying I want to get rid of the fraction, but yes, that is. So we get 2x squared minus 6x. Okay. Then at this point, after I do that, and I actually did all the distribution at the same time because, well, you should be able to do that as well. You get that lovely equation. At this point, we should realize that we have a quadratic. That gives me the hint that that's where I'm using the discriminant. So I'm going to move everything over, get it equal to 0, because that's pretty much the only way to solve a quadratic. Minus 26x plus ax minus 3a plus 78 equals 0. Now this is where you got to be careful with using your quadratic, or your discriminant on this one. I have 2x variables and I have this over here, so we have to kind of group them together properly. So the way I would do it is 2x squared plus x times negative 26 plus a plus 78 minus 3a. Especially using the parentheses, so the first thing you should notice is I factored in x out of the 26x and the ax, and I also rearranged the backside just to make it a little easier on myself, because I don't want to have those problems with negatives and things like that and such. So here on this one, I moved these kind of around and just grouped them all together to make it a positive 78 minus 3a. And it doesn't matter if you necessarily do it that way or not. You can rearrange them as long as you do it properly, but that will make your life a lot easier, in my opinion. And now at this point, I think we wanted, what, no intersections on this problem? So we want no intersections. So what does it mean to have no intersections?
The lines don't cross.
So which means what about this equation that I currently have?
You have no solution?
I have no solution. Very good. So when does a quadratic, because I have a quadratic equation, have no solution?
When it equals 0.
No.
When it's less than 0.
Using the wrong words. Careful.
There's multiple variables.
Definitely not.
Like,
So Alyssa was very close, but she used the wrong words, unfortunately. She used the one word she should never use. What is the one word we don't use?
Bruh.
No, we definitely use bruh.
Okay.
She used the word it.
When the function is less than 0.
That is incorrect.
The solutions.
When the discriminant
Discriminant.
is less than 0.
A quadratic has no real solutions if the discriminant is less than 0. Remember, we talked about this. You have to know what your discriminant being less than 0, equal to 0, or greater than 0 means. So if we want no solutions, no real solutions, the discriminant has to be less than that. So we take b squared minus 4ac less than 0. And we just plug in. A is 2, B is the negative 26 plus A, and C goes there. And you just plug it in. So you get A minus 26, I'm going to rearrange that, squared, minus 4 times 2 times 78 minus 3A being less than 0. You, again, unfortunately, did get a quadratic in A, but it's going to factor for us very nice and neatly. It does take a little bit of effort, but it does factor. I forget what exactly it boils down into, but I know it's A minus 2 and A minus 26 being less than 0. And that happens in between 2 and 26. Yeah. So if you do your number line with 2 and 26 on it, it is negative there, positive there, positive there. And we want where it is negative. So our answer is from 2 to 26. And don't put brackets because it's not equal to, so it's parentheses. Hopefully that one shouldn't have been too terribly difficult for most of you. I know some of you did ask for help with it, which is fine, but hopefully if you didn't ask for help, that shouldn't have been too bad. I'm not going to, like I said, do the actual work of it, factoring, because I have faith that all of you can do that. Any questions specifically on number 1 that anybody wants me to reiterate or go back over? Okay. Number 2. Get a lovely curve. Do I need to do A for anybody? Because again, you have the answer, so you should know if you got it right or wrong. Do I need to do A? Because that one's pretty basic, I think. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yep, I'm gonna need help. I'm just.
That's fine. I just need to know.
Yeah.
So obviously, point A and B are your points of intersection. So you just need to find them. So we have y equals 7 root x and y is equal to, I forget what the other one was already, 6x plus 2. How do I find points of intersection between two equations or functions?
Set them equal to one another.
So I can set the right-hand sides equal to each other to figure out that, because I'm doing basically substitution. So 7 root x is equal to 6x plus 2. Square both sides. You get 49x is equal to 36x squared plus 24x plus 4. And then you make it equal to 0 because it's a quadratic. So 36x squared minus 25x plus 4 equals 0. Now, at this point, most of you probably would not be able to factor that because the answers do end up being fractional answers. That works out pretty nice and neat. But most of you probably would have a little bit of trouble factoring this, to be honest, because this is not something you're normally used to seeing in factoring. So you have one of like 3-ish options. You can quadratic it. If you want to use the quadratic formula, by all means, go right ahead for it. A lot of students opt to do that first. I have no problems with that. Does not matter how you solve it. You could factor it. if you're good at factoring, or you could use the slide and divide technique I've showed you. Some of you like that, some of you don't. I don't care how you factor it. Let's see, what is it? Ends up being 9. No, so it would be 9x plus 1. No, 9x plus 4.
It's -4 and -1.
Oh yeah, minus, you're right. And and 4x minus 1. That's -16 and -9. Yeah, that's good. So those are your two factors. They're set equal to 0. Then you solve those. So x equals 4/9 and 1/4. I think all they wanted were the x coordinates, or they want the whole thing. Find the x coordinates. So we're done. That's all they wanted. Make sense, Miguel? And then, of course, obviously,
Yes.
anybody else who needed that. Okay. Part B, find the value of k for which it's tangent to the curve. Okay, so that's not too bad. What does it mean if the two are tangent? Somebody, anybody, what does it mean if they are tangent?
They meet at one exact point.
Okay.
They have a slope of 0.
Ooh, they do not have a slope of 0.
Is the derivative at that point?
No. So, definition of a tangent. So far, Thomas has told us that they touch only once. That is not the only definition of a tangent, though. So there's something else that we need to add to that. So not only do they touch at one point, they have the same slope at that point. So that's the way that they're going to be tangent. They're going to touch at one point. Is that so the line will have the same slope. So take derivatives. The easiest way to do this one is to take some derivatives. So if we have y is equal to 7 root x and y is equal to 6x plus k, because we're looking for our value of k. So y prime here will be 7 halves x to the negative 1/2 and y prime equals 6. Now this doesn't help us find k, it helps us find x, but then once I have x, I can then plug some stuff in. It does make it easier. This is not the only way to do this problem. This is by far the easiest way to do this problem. So I know 7 halves to the negative 1/2 is equal to 6. So then I'm going to do, so x to the negative 1/2 is equal to 12 over 7. I'm going to raise both sides to the negative second power. So x will be equal to 49 over 144. Once I know x, I can plug x back in, find y, plug in over there. You'll see in a second, hopefully. But once I have my x value, I'm going to take this. Let's see which way I want to do this. Plug it back in there. So I get y is equal to 7 times root 49 over 144, which is 49 over 12. And then I can plug both of these in there and solve for k. So I get 49 over 12 equals 6 times 49 over 144 plus k. And use your scientific calculator to solve for that fraction, because I don't really feel like doing it. And that should get you their answer of 49 over 24, apparently. Works for me. Any questions on that part? take the silence as we're good. Alright, moving on to question 3 then. Does anybody need question 3? Because again, you have the answers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, as soon as they give you any information, you should always write down what that information means. So at this point, they gave us both the distance, or the lengths, actually, I think they called it, or what way they formed it. The length, yes, and the gradient or the slope. So that right off the bat triggers I'm using both distance formula and slope formula. A3 for B. So I'm just going to go ahead and write them out. So the distance formula is the square root of, doesn't matter what order you put them in. So A minus 4 squared plus 3 minus B squared, whatever value that equals. And then you have the slope, which is B minus 3 over 4 minus A equals whatever that equals. 4 root 5 and negative 1/2. And then you solve these by system of equations, basically. So I would square both sides on the distance formula. So you get A minus 4 squared plus 3 minus B squared equals 16 times 5 is 80. So if you square both sides, and over here you're going to get B minus 3 is equal to negative 2 plus 1/2 A. Everybody follow me so far? Okay, at that point you have multiple options for solving this. I would, to avoid fractions, I'm going to multiply this by 2 and then substitute in for A. So 2B minus 6 equals negative 4 plus A. A is equal to 2B minus 2. That's going to be your easiest way of doing this and not having any fractions. If you do it any other way, for the most part, you're going to have fractions. So I would do that and then plug in here. So I get 2B minus 2 minus 4 squared plus 3 minus B squared. So is this 2B minus 6 squared? So you're going to have to multiply all this out and do a quadratic formula, basically, to solve for B. So was it 4B squared minus 24B plus 36 plus 9 minus 6B plus B squared equals 80. Combine all your like terms and then either factor or quadratic it, whichever depends on working out. 5B squared minus 30B plus 45 equals 80. Subtract 80 on both sides. Was that 35? That's nice. Everything's divisible by 5. So if you divide everything by 5, which makes your life real easy, you get B squared minus 6B minus 7 equals 0. So B minus 7B plus 1. So B equals 7 comma negative 1. Everybody follow the rest of the work I did there. Anybody have questions on what I did?
Why can't I just use the regular slope formula to find B and A?
Because you have
Like-
2 variables in one equation?
Yeah, but why can't I just say what B minus 3 would equal 1?
Because B minus 3 does not equal 1. What happens if it's B minus 3 equals 2 and 4 minus A is supposed to equal 4? Or what if it's 3 and 6? Or 4 and 8? That's a simplified version. You don't know what the actual answers are. That's
Okay.
why. Because not only does it have to have a slope of negative 1/2, it also has to have a distance of 4 square roots of 5. So it has to have both.
Oh, okay.
And before you ask, no, you can't just plug in both. They would give you like 0 points for that if you try to be like, oh, it's this. Odds are they're going to be numbers. Yes, they're not going to be like nasty, but they also could be nasty. They could be square roots and things like that as well.
Okay.
So odds are they're not square roots with the slope being equal to negative 1/2. They're going to come out to be nice, neat numbers. However, they could be decimals, they could be roots and things like that, and other problems as well. So you would get like 0 out of the 6 points if you tried doing that. Okay. And then once you have B, you can plug into, at that point, you can plug into your slope equation up at the top to get your A values. So if B is 7, you get 4 on top. So you'd have to get 8 on bottom, so 7, negative 4. Actually, negative 4, 7 for one of your solutions. So A, my marker's running out, equals negative 4, no, positive 8, sorry. So it's got to be negative. So if I put 7 in on top, I get positive 4, which means I need a negative 8 on bottom. So that's got to be negative 12, actually. No, positive 12. Going crazy. And if it's 1, then I need negative 4. So you're 7, 12, and negative 1, negative 4. Or negative 4, negative 1, whatever are your answer sets. You do have to put them as answer sets. So be careful. They do have to go together. So it has to be 12 and 7 and negative 4, negative 1. Any questions on how I found the A values or anything else in the problem? Notice, what does that whole problem involve?
Algebra.
Oh my god, it's algebra! That's literally all algebra 1. Maybe some algebra. I'll call it algebra 2. But none of that was super difficult that none of you can't do. 4. Okay, not too bad. Do I need to do number 4? Maybe.
I need help.
Okay, that's fine. So 4. The first thing you gotta do is find points P and Q. How do you find points P and Q?
I don't know. I set them equal to each other, but it didn't really work.
Well, you can solve for y and set them equal to each other. I would definitely not do that. I would use substitution because it's already set up for substitution. You guys have got to get out of this habit of, I have to solve this for y and set them equal. No. Substitute in is much easier.
I did substitute.
So 3 root x minus 2. And then the other one, 3x 4y plus 3.
Oh yeah. So I did that and I tried to like put it in the quadratic, whatever. And I don't know what happened.
You have to square things first. But hold on, I'll show you.
I
So
kept it in the
3x
left. I
minus
got
4, 3.
quadratic.
So 3x minus 12. At this point, we have to figure out a way to get rid of the radical. The only way to get rid of the radical is to isolate it and square both sides. So I'm going to move it over just to make my life easier. So I get 3x plus 3 is equal to 12 root x minus 2. Some people want to divide by 12. I don't really care if you do that or not, personally. But I'm going to square both sides. So we get 9x squared plus 18x plus 9 is equal to 144 x minus 288. I went ahead and distributed it on the right hand side, so I'm going to have to do that anyway. And 144 times negative 2 is negative 288. At this point, it's quadratic. Anytime you have a quadratic, everything on one side set it equal to 0. So you get 9x squared minus 126 x plus 280, 297 equals 0. First thing I would check is to see if they're all divisible by 9. I don't know if they are or not. Are they?
I think that's what.
Yeah, they're all divisible by 9.
For, like, my final quadratic one, I didn't get the numbers you got after 9x.
You should check that then. But these are all divisible by 9.
Yeah.
Easy way to know, and just in case people don't know this, to know if a number is divisible by 9, add up all the digits. If that's a number divisible by 9, then it's divisible by 9. So 1 plus 2 plus 6 is 9, that's divisible by 9. 2 plus 9 plus 7 is 18, 18 is divisible by 9, divisible by 9. So you get x squared, 14x, I don't know what that one is. Uh, 33. At that point, it's pretty easy because there's only two divisors of 33, which are 11 and 3. That does add to 14, so you get x minus 11, x minus 3. So x is equal to 11, comma 3. So you have your x values for P and Q. Then we need to find our y values for P and Q. And you can plug those back into this one up here. So y is equal to, if I plug in 11, I get 9. If I plug in 3, I get 3. And then it just wants the distance formula, or the distance of those. Personally, I don't use the distance formula if I'm doing something like this. I just do the Pythagorean theorem. So like I think of it as I have a thing at 11 and 9, and then at 3 and 3. And then I make a nice little right triangle. This is a value of 6. That's a value of 8. So PQ is equal to 6 squared plus 8 squared, square rooted. If I did that right in my head. 48, or not 40, 36, 64, yeah. Which is equal to 10. Any questions on what I did?
I literally just screwed up some addition, so
Yeah, that happens. That's why we use calculators. Like, not trying to be mean or anything.
I'm pretty sure I did. I think I just put the wrong like numbers in.
Okay, let's not do that. It is an easy thing to happen. I mean, everybody does it. Heck, I do it. I have problems where I've made those mistakes on tests and things like that. So I understand it happens. Don't get me wrong. We just have to try our best to be very diligent not to make those mistakes. Don't take things for granted. You have a calculator. Please use the calculator. Trust me, even I do basic calculations when I'm doing one of my tests just to make sure I'm doing things right, especially if it's like multiplication and things like that of two-digit numbers and stuff. Please double check things on the calculator. Don't miss something because you did it wrong as a basic calculation. Okay. Any other questions on number 4? All right. What about number 5? I'm going to assume yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, so... Oh, A is really easy to solve for. Okay. Alright, so we got minus 2y equals 70. 10. I think it was what, B, 10B? Yeah, okay. So looking at the information they gave us this line, it passes through the points 10, 10, and B, 10B. They want us to find A and B. Well, if I look at that, what do I need to know in order to find A? Again, looking at the equation, what do I need in order to find A?
A point.
Be more specific than that.
Okay, an X and a Y.
Okay, why do I need an X and a Y to solve for A?
Well, because I literally give it to you to make your life easy, so just like...
Nope, not what they get. In general, why do I need an X and a Y to solve for A? What's the concept there? I'll give you a hint. How many variables are
equation of
in
the
your
line?
equation? No, it's not because it's a line. How many variables are in that equation?
2.
Which two you seeing, Miguel?
X and Y.
3, dog. What about A?
Bro, what about A?
I thought it was a constant.
No, A is a variable. Now, it's going to
Oh.
be a constant in this problem, but A is a variable. Do I know what A is?
No.
So by very definition, that's a variable. Now, if I
Okay.
tell you that it's a constant, then we know that for sure. However, depending on which points it goes through, that's a variable. Now, in this problem, yes, it's a constant, but until I've solved for it, it's a variable at this point. Does that make sense, Miguel?
Oh, yeah, it does.
Now, the thing about it, it's not going to take on different values. Like X and Y could take on an infinite number of values. A is only going to take on one value that we solve for, but it's still a variable at this point. So until I have defined it and said, oh, okay, this equation now goes through these points, find the value for A, at that point it's a variable. Well, in order to solve an equation, how many unknowns can I have? To solve an equation for a variable, how many unknowns can I have?
Just one.
Just one. So that means I have to know X and Y, and if I know X and Y, I can solve for A. Otherwise, I need more equations. Well, fortunately for us, as I already pointed out, they've given us an X and a Y. Well, if I know X and Y, I can solve for my last variable being A. And that's exactly what you do. You plug in the 10 and 10, solve for A. So A times 10 minus 20 equals 30. A equals 5. Done. No big deal. Then we need to solve for B. Well, at that point, obviously B is in my X and Y, so the obvious idea there is to plug in for X and Y. So I get 5B minus 2 times 10B equals 30, negative 15, so B equals negative 2. And there you go. Check my answers, make sure I'm right. I am, good. Okay. Any questions on that part? Make sense, hopefully? Okay. And then part B should be real easy. Find the coordinates of the midpoint. Do I need to do that for anybody?
No.
Anybody else say yes? Anybody please? If you do, please answer. If not, I'm going to skip it. Okay. And then part C, find the perpendicular bisector. What do we know about perpendicular bisectors?
It splits the line like in the middle.
Okay, it goes directly through the midpoint, which we just found in part B, or you did. So that's why they did part B, so that you have the answer for that for part C. What else do we know about perpendicular bisectors?
It's like a right angle.
Which means what? What does that give us?
It's two right triangles.
Reciprocal?
There you go, Miss Kenna. The slope is the opposite reciprocal. So because it's a perpendicular bisector, the slope will be the opposite reciprocal of the line AB, and you will have the point, and it goes through the midpoint. So the midpoint was, I think, -4, -5 or something. Yeah, 4, -5. Okay. So our midpoint from part B should have been 4, -5. Our point B was -2, -20. So if I want the perpendicular bisector, I need the slope first. So what does it say? Rise of 30, run of 12? That sucks. So your slope is 30 over 12, divided both by 6, so 5 halves. So your perpendicular slope will be -2/5. So y minus 5, -5, so plus 5 is equal to -2/5. X minus 4. I think that's what they were looking for, right? The equation? Yeah. And there's your equation. Let's see if they leave it in slope intercept or point slope. They put it into slope intercept, but you don't have to. There is no rule against doing point slope versus slope intercept, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions on that one? Okay, taking the silence as a no. Alright, number 6. Line with gradient -2, passing the intersects x axis, y axis of b, find the area of A O B in terms of t. Okay, so if you did not draw this out, I highly suggest you draw things like this out, because it will give you a great visual representation of what's going on. Definitely need to get new markers today. Alright, so let's see, we have a slope of -2, 3t, 2t. So I know my triangle is going to look something like that, and I have a point here, 3t, 2t. And I don't really care where it's at, it's just a visual representation for myself. And I'm looking for the area of the triangle, right? AOB. And I know this is B. That's A. That's 0. Well, how do I find the area of a triangle? Hopefully everybody should know this one.
A² plus, wait, 1/2 base times height.
Bruh, you almost got it. So area is equal to 1/2 base times height. We also know the slope is equal to -2. So these are all things that are going to be needing to help us find this area of the triangle, because I need to find the slope here, or the point here, and the point here. What they're not telling you to do, at least the way I see it, is I'm going to write the equation of this line and then find my x and y intercepts. So the equation of the line will be y minus 2t is equal to -2 x minus 3t. So if I need the coordinates for A, I know that the x is equal to 0, so I can substitute that in. So I get y minus 2t is equal to -2, 0 minus 3t. So y is equal to, what was that, 6t plus 8t. And this is the difficult part of this question, is figuring out that right there. But once you figure out that you're looking for an x and a y intercept, if you write an equation of a line because they gave you a slope and a point, you can find your y-intercept and your x-intercept. Now these answers will have t's in them, and they even told you find it in terms of t, which means t's will be in your answer. Then you do the same thing but make y equals 0, so you get 0. So it's 0 minus 2t is equal to -2x plus 6t, so -8, 4. So x is equal to 4t. And then just plug those in for your base and your height, because your base is from 0 to x and up there. So your area is equal to 1/2 8t times 4t, which is 16t squared. Now, obviously I know that was not the easiest thing, but does that make sense after I've showed it to you? should I take the silence as a yes or a no?
I don't know.
Does everybody see how I got the values for y and x?
Ye.
Yes, that clears it up a lot.
Again, the hint there is that they gave you a slope and a point. Anytime they give you a slope and a point, you have the option of writing a line equation for a line. Whether you do or not depends on the question. But once I'm looking for an x-intercept or a y-intercept, then that tells me write the equation of the line. Okay. Line P. Did anybody by chance happen to check the answer for part B?
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure somebody copied it. Now that I look at there, because I looked at somebody's work, and the answer for part B just said proof.
Oh no. I didn't do that.
Oh Jesus. Oh God.
Can you go over it, please?
I'm going
That's
to.
really funny.
But the fact that I
Cool.
looked at somebody's, I don't remember whose it was off the top of my head right now, but I guarantee when I was
funny.
flipping through some work at some point, I saw the word proof, and I'm like, what? Like, okay, whatever.
I mean, I'm dumb, but boy, I'm not that dumb.
That's awesome. I want to shake the hand of whoever wrote that. That's awesome.
Proof. Oh, that's good.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
have
was it you?
I'm gonna have
No,
to,
it wasn't. That's the thing. It wasn't.
I'm gonna have to go through and see who wrote that, but somebody did. I remember seeing somebody write the word proof.
Proof.
Oh man, who was it? I'll find it out later. That's
Turns
hilarious. I'm not
out it
I'm
was
not gonna tell
Thomas.
them who it is. I'm not gonna tell you guys who it is. But the fact that I know I saw somebody write proof. Okay. All right then. So let's see. Line P. So the first thing I'm gonna look at is I know it's perpendicular to AB. So what's it mean that it's perpendicular to AB? Anybody? What's it mean that it's perpendicular to AB?
It has a negative reciprocal to AB.
Yes. Be more specific. Be careful though,
The
because
line.
what did you just use that you're not allowed to use?
It.
Used it. And it can't have negative reciprocals. The slopes are negative reciprocals.
Oh yeah.
So when I go to do my line, let's see if my blue marker will work for any amount of time. It doesn't matter where the point is, so I'm just going to draw point P there, and it's going to do that. And I know that's C, so I can stop there. So I don't care if it's an accurate representation or not. This is just for my visual representation. P goes through C, it's perpendicular to this one. I don't care necessarily where it goes through it, all that kind of stuff. I don't care if it's an accurate representation or not. This is just for my understanding. So when I do that, I have to understand that this is at the point 0, comma, I'm going to call it, I'm running out of variables here. Let's just call it 0, comma, I don't want to use that. We'll call it 0, comma, m. Or m, comma, 0, actually. Because I know how to do points. So a couple of things about this is as soon as I do that, I can kind of get an equation for a point or for the line, things like that, because I know a slope, I know a point, and I'm trying to show that the midpoint of PC lies on X. They don't tell us anything about P, do they? Okay, no. And I don't really know much about anything about P other than its coordinates are X, comma, Y. So I have to show that the midpoint of P is on the line y equals x. In other words, the y variable has to equal the x variable, things like that. So I'm going to write an equation for a line and see if that's the way to go, because honestly, I've never done this problem. So let's see. So I get y I'm going to use this 0.0m here because it makes it a lot easier in my opinion. So y minus 0 is equal to, we know it's got a slope of 1/2 x minus m. Okay, so y is equal to 1/2 x minus 1/2 m. I got that. Okay, I'll call this x1, y1. Let's see what happens if I do it with the other point as well. So y minus y1 is equal to 1/2 x1, no, x 1/2 x minus 1/2 x1. So if I get that, does that help me in any way? So midpoint will be x1 plus m over 2, comma, y1 plus 0 over 2. Let's see. Okay, so that's just y1 over 2. Oh, this is not going to be fun, is it? I wonder if there's an easier way for doing this. Intersects the x-axis at C. I don't want to get too difficult on you guys. It's only, what, 3 points? Right? No, this is 4 points. It's not going to be that much work.
Can't you find the midpoint of AB and then plug it in for Y and X?
No, because you don't have, is the midpoint point C? Or is that?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay.
So, thank you. I didn't catch that part. That's the missing part that I did not catch. So,
Cool.
this is point P. So, thank you for that, Kenna, for making that realization. Part of this, the reason I do this the way I do, as you noticed, is you're going to miss things. I missed that completely in that they already gave you point P. I didn't realize it was a brand new point. I thought it was a brand new point. So part of what I just did was not correct. But again, the reason I do this to show you guys, you're going to miss questions. You're going to forget things. You're going to miss things. On an exam, I would have missed that entire question because I would have not been able to figure out, or I would have had to go back and realize that this is point P. So point P has to go through, we'll just put point C right here. I don't know if that's actually where it is or not, but whatever. So I'm only looking for this piece. But nice catch, Kenna. Very good. So now you know that you have the point. So your midpoint is 3t plus m over 2 and 2t plus 0 over 2. So it's t, and then you got to find a value for m, basically, and you can write the equation. Maybe I'll do it in blue. So you can do y minus, let's see what I'm going to do. I'll actually use slope. So I know that the rise is 2t, the run will be 3t minus m equals negative 1/2. So I'm going to solve for m and plug in. That'll be the easiest way to do it. So you get 2t is equal to negative 3 halves t plus m. M is equal to 7 halves t. That does not seem right. 9 halves. Notice I should get the point t comma t. I would not get t that way. I need m to be 1t. Did I do something wrong? So rise, so 2t minus 0. 3t minus m equals, oh, it's positive 1 half. That's much better. No, that would be 1 half then. Somebody's typing something. That's probably pre-calc. Did I make a mistake somewhere? Slope is positive 1 half. Rise would be 3t minus m. Oh, yeah, I did. There's a 1 half right there. Okay, there we go. So you get 1 half t equals 1 half m. M equals t. So then you get 3t plus t over 2, which is 4t over 2. Oh, negative. Bad algebra mistakes. Please don't make them. T comma t. Therefore, it's on line y equals x. Done. Okay. Difficult problem. Yes. Couple things. Again, I do these the way I do for a reason. I've never seen that problem before in my life. Notice how even I looked at it, struggled with it, missed something. If you miss some details, you're going to miss the problem. What you can't do is let that fluster you and get you on a hizzy for the rest of the problems. It's very easy to miss a small detail on one of these questions. One question is not the end of the world, though. You can't let that destroy the rest of your problems and get you all kinds of flustered. Do something. If you can't figure it out, move on. Go back, try to figure out some little important detail. If you miss something or reread the question, maybe you'll pick it up in the second time. Does that make sense? Hopefully everybody understand. I mean, again, and don't be like me. I was trying to do a bunch of algebra in my head. Don't ever do that, please. Any questions on that one before we end class for the day?
No.
Does it make sense now that I've done the problem? And again,
Yes, sir.
okay, apparently my headset just had to cut out a second ago. Any other questions? Again, I missed that if anybody said anything because my headset cut out. Alrighty, then that would be class for the day. If you did not submit your homework, I highly suggest you submit it by tomorrow unless you want a 0.